Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason. I'm the training director of the Veloster program, and today we're going to have an engagement workshop. And Janelle Billingsley, Claudia Lazo, and Abba Siddiqui will be presenting engagement tactics. So, with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Claudia Janelle and her team. Thank you.
Hi, this is Al Perez.
Hey, Al, how's it going?
Good.
All right. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Janelle Billingsley, and I'm the lead for the engagement portion of the Velociter program. So today, engagement primarily focuses on 3 of the 4 main activities, main program objectives. Go ahead. So I wanted you to get a sense of, we're going to have a discussion, we're going to talk a little bit about engagement, but I also wanted you to have a sense of who you'll primarily be working with on the engagement team. We have a vast network, but I just want the team that you're primarily going to be working with to introduce themselves, and we will start with AJ and then move on to Abed and move on to Claudia. Just
yeah,
provide.
hello. I'm AJ Yarmy. I have, probably 2 years of doing DoD and government business development, particularly, but also have delved into the medical, the industrial, and some of the consumer marketplace. For about the last 15 years, I've been consulting in the small business arena, helping clients get about $1 million worth of contracts with the government. And prior to that, worked for probably for several larger companies and a few smaller ones, and have experience in that arena as well. And pretty much my focus has been on productization, commercialization, and the R&D that precedes it, but helping companies be successful.
Hey everyone, this is Abid. Well, I'm really excited to join the team where my role on the engagement team is to help with the commercial engagement, folks companies that work in the commercial industry as well as investors. So my background, I spent 2 years or so working in business advisory for a number of consulting companies ranging from Baker McKenzie. So a lot of my clients have been generally in the technology space. However, I do have some experience in pharmaceutical companies as well. Super excited to be kind of on the team. Looking forward to working with all the different stuff. Taking a look at high level some of the technologies, and I'm excited to kind of see how we can get you folks connected to the industry.
So thank you, everybody. We see that we're getting a number of comments about breaking up and feedback. So if you just give us a second, we're gonna try to see if we can address that. So hold on 1 second, please. Yeah. because hi, can everyone hear me okay? This is Janelle Billingsley. Okay, are you getting any feedback? Okay, fantastic. So we're probably going to leave the camera off and just work, we'll pass the headset around. So thank you so much for your patience. Sorry about this. Okay, great. Start with, you go ahead, Abid. Sorry if I have some earwax in there. This goes under again on this side. There you go. I think AJ was fine because he was doing it a different way.
Hey everyone, I'm just gonna kind of reintroduce myself for those that didn't catch me the first time. Yeah, so my name is Abid Siddiqui. I'm working on the engagement team, working on the commercial side of the team. My background has been for the past 10 or so years focused on the commercial industry in the areas of technology, healthcare, / pharmaceuticals, as well as the retail area. I've worked on things or topics of supply chain management, capital raising. So as I look through the portfolio of the Velocity companies that are currently engaged, definitely have some areas where I think that we can kind of work together and try to get you guys in positions or in front of clients and potential investors that relative to your company. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Claudia.
Hi, everybody. This is Claudia Lazo, and I am the engagement analyst for the DoD Velociter program. I will be helping you guys analyze your technologies and seeing where we can fit you best into the commercial and government field. So I'm helping out with that. And I will pass it back to Janelle.
All right, again, my name is Janelle Billingsley, and I'm the lead for the engagement team. My entire career has been with the Department of Defense in some way, shape, fashion, or form. I come from the rapid acquisition community. I'm a level 2 certified acquisition professional, and I sat in a unique space during a unique time in American history where we stood up institutions that created technical solutions or ideas on the back of paper and made those things into physical products and then quickly got them out to the warfighter. So every day you never knew what you were going to get or what kind of requirement was going to come in. And in addition to that, we took those solutions that we developed, we had them tested, and we also worked to transition those solutions to major programs of record. So I have worked a lot with small businesses, I've worked a lot with large PMs and POs, I've worked with the test community, and a whole host of other things, and I did that going on almost 10 years. So anyways, we look forward to working with you on the engagement team. We look forward to your questions, and we're really, really excited about what we are going to be able to do to influence innovation and getting new solutions to the warfighter, and more importantly, how we might be able to influence American innovation. So we're really looking forward to that. So I'm just going to go over the outline really quickly. We are going to go over the objectives. We're going to define what engagement is. We're going to identify what you need to expect next. We're going to do a very light overview of the landscape. The landscape is very detailed and broad, but just to give you a sense of where you are and where we're trying to go and what some of the challenges are. We're going to talk a little bit about the personas of the individuals that you will be potentially approaching to share information about your technology and those various communities. And then we're going to look at, how the military buys, like with the different categories, and just start to get you thinking about who buys those types of products. We're going to talk a little bit about testing and the importance of testing, and we're going to illuminate some best practices and lessons learned. And then we will answer some of the questions that we got before. I think we got some yesterday on Sunday, and then a few this morning, and also share a little, we might answer them with a vignette or two. All right, next slide. So the purpose of this brief is to provide an overview of the DoD's innovation and purchasing landscape. And we hope to offer insights to assist you in determining where you are within this landscape and where you're attempting to go. And to achieve this, we plan on discussing some of the major players, identify some of their major drivers, like what are they thinking about? What are the things that they're looking for? And maybe provide some insights on how to best engage with them. So engagement for the Velociter program will encompass activities required to connect program participants, that's you, and with government and commercial buyers, complementary R&D resources. So some of you are at very early stages of R&D and that you're gonna need some assistance to move through the R&D process. And so we're hoping to connect you with resources like that and technologies for mutually beneficial partnerships. So we've had a number of businesses that realize that they have technologies that are very similar, or they've seen how that another company's technology can actually help them improve their product. And so we want to make those connections as well. So the Velociter engagement team, and Claudia is going to help you with this, performs the following.
So we start out with research, and we have analyzed all of your current technical solutions. And we also are going to assist with the identification of the current needs or the technology gaps in the opportunity areas. So we have been looking into across the DoD, all of the industry clusters located in the US, and also all of the state and local government needs. And then we are going to have, in order to prepare you guys, we're going to have monthly seminars, and we're going to have monthly presentation reviews, and then we're going to identify potential events that you guys can go to that would fit perfectly with your technology, and then let you know which important government PMs, PEOs will be in attendance. Now that you've completed the training, we will be transitioning to engagement, and here's what to expect. So we completed the initial analysis and provided some initial recommendations based upon the information that we received during the application and assessment phases of the program. And we will revise our recommendations based on the refined work that you completed with the Velociter mentors. We strongly recommend that you work diligently to refine the deliverables by the end of this week so that we can provide additional recommendations for you. And then based on the information provided via the update deliverables and other information provided by your mentors, we will do monthly surveys to figure out what process you guys are in with the contacts. And then we'll have forums where we will have some time where you can talk to our SMEs about any issues or problems that you might be going through. And then we'll have the presentation reviews, and this will be to ensure that you are in tip-top shape before you present to a potential customer. And so our SMEs will be able to help you with their experience. And they'll be able to offer critical insight and advice so that your message is tailored to each specific customer.
All right. Thank you so much, Claudia. Really appreciate that overview. So I hope you guys have a better sense of what to expect with regard to engagement. And you'll be receiving some additional communications from both your mentors towards the end of the week and our communications team. So we want to make sure that you're clear on that. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the landscape. This is a very, very rudimentary diagram, and it's that way intentionally, just so that you can kind of understand that there is a big divide. It's kind of like a black space in between two very distinct groups. And you have the R&D community, which is on our left. The R&D community constitutes, both government and industry people playing in that space. And then you have the kind of like the buying or the purchasing community, which is on the right. And the purchasing community, as it relates to government or as it relates to the military, are generally, or we're going to be talking a lot about PMs and PEOs, and they have very different requirements than the R&D community has. So to just kind of describe some of the attributes of the entities on the left, they have very soft requirements. They're sort of create one-of-a-kind solutions. Sometimes they're standalone, and that particular community accepts high risk, and failure is expected and very much tolerated. On the other side, there's actual competition. There are hard requirements that PMs and PEOs and other people in that space have to manage too. There are production quantities. It is highly controlled, and solutions have to fit into a much bigger picture, especially when you're thinking about the operational environment and where it has to go and what it has to work with, as far as interoperability is concerned. And there's very low tolerance for risk because of the nature of their customers. And failure is not an option because, at that point, you're really talking about a system or a solution that a soldier is very much depending on. And that could be the one solution that's keeping them alive or keeping them out of harm's way. So there's really very little room for failure. All right, hold on a second. So I'm just going to make a quick comment on transitioning. This kind of touches on why, in many ways, it's very difficult to transition from the left of this diagram to the right, because it is, there isn't one process. There are problems because there's differences in processes and how those two communities do businesses. There's differences with respect to funding, the type of funding, the kinds of quantities that someone can buy. There are different requirements with respect to integration and testing and fielding. So, so getting from one side of the diagram to the other in many ways is very challenging. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the actors that you guys will most likely be engaging with. And, I think it's very important for us to, very important for the participants to understand who they're talking to, what their main drivers are, what things are important to them, like what success means to them, so that you can tailor your message and really address some of the problems and or issues and or concerns that they have. When making a decision as to whether or not to buy your particular product. So for the warfighter, success when they're thinking means a system that's effective in combat and that's easy to operate and maintain. And when you're thinking about the PM community and those people that are on the right, they definitely take a lot of feedback from the users, from the warfighter community as to whether or not they should implement a particular solution or not. So you need to be aware of that. For program manager, success really means that something's delivered on time and that it's within the cost that they may have briefed, in their POM or when they asked for resources for budget, and that it meets the warfighter's requirements. So again, that's a very different discussion, perhaps, than what the warfighter is looking for. The warfighter isn't necessarily thinking of cost, or schedule, but that's definitely something that the PM is on the hook for. And then when we think about the R&D community, they're looking to really increase the knowledge base, and they're looking to find the latest and greatest and the best thing out there. And that may not take into consideration some of the issues and or drivers that both the warfighter and the PM community are looking at. Next slide. All right, so we're going to kind of describe the different communities that you guys will probably be engaging and working with. Hold on one second. All right, so the science community, and there are different factions within each of these communities, and you really need to be aware of who you're talking to and where they fit in. And you really have to think about how your technology fits into the overall picture to know that whether or not you're even having the right conversation. Thank you for that. The right conversation with the right group of people. And I'm looking at the comments. Thank you so much. So scientists and managers of SMT programs, managers and staffs of their organizations. So those are some of the people that are in the science communities. It's important. I've definitely noticed that a number of people will talk about their program manager, but they're really talking about a manager on the R&D or someone in a lab or something like that, which is very different than a program manager in the procurement community, which is kind of like that group that's on the right. You really need to understand the distinctions and limitations between those two groups. You know what those particular program managers develop, or those particular individuals in the science community develop knowledge about key technologies that may be needed in the future. So they're forward looking. They're not necessarily looking for a requirement that, or looking to solve a problem that exists right now. There definitely are some individuals that are in that business, but you know, you have to be cognizant of the fact that they might not be thinking about how do we plug this in right now. The buying power, remember, they're only authorized based on the kinds of funding and resources that they get to procure very small quantities. And generally, they're only authorized to do enough to complete very early tests, which for most procurement or procurement people that are attached to a lab would say, I can only get away with procuring maybe 3. And that's enough for an initial, a spare, and a backup for redundancy if there's any failure during testing. So please keep that in mind. The same is very much true for the R&D community. You know, these are scientists and engineers and professionals that have the expertise necessary to field technology and military systems. You will see some of these folks that may be attached to a engineering shop or something like that that's very close to a PM or PEO in the military environment. They develop knowledge about key technologies, again, that might be used in the future, but they also advise on incremental improvements that can be made with the system as it stands. Again, it's a very different conversation that you're having with them. The kind of conversation that you should be having with them is, you know, talking about the system as the current system that a PM or PEO has right now, and how improvements could be potentially made to that, because sometimes they're kind of going back and forth between the two. Again, they're generally procuring very small quantities of stuff. Then there's the acquisition community, and this includes the program executive officers, program managers, product managers, and staffs within and their organizations. So, you know, that's where you're going to get your contracting officers, you're going to get your resource managers, you're going to get a lot of people that are part of a very big system that's the defense acquisition system as a whole, the standard system as a whole. And, you know, they manage the development, procurement, production, and fielding of, you know, major systems. And again, their buying power is very different from the R&D community. The kinds of funding that they receive allows them to make larger procurements, and they're in the business of outfitting an entire Army, Navy, or Air Force with a particular capability in general. There are exceptions to that, but that's kind of in general what they're in the business of doing. And some of the things that you really need to be aware of, particularly when you're trying to sell this community, is you know, identifying particular transition points and delineating responsibilities, being able to identify funding, synchronizing your schedule, your development schedule with their fielding schedule, understanding the constraints of intellectual property. You know, that is a huge issue that oftentimes comes up during contracting, particularly if it's a large procurement. You know, interoperability and integration, those are all things that you really need to make sure that you think about when you're developing your solution. And, you know, when it comes time to try to convince a PM to buy your solution, that you have put some thought into how it would integrate into the much larger military architecture. Supportability and affordability are also big issues for that community that you need to be sure to address. So there's a sustainment community. These are operators and program and product managers, and also your logisticians. These are people that are very much involved with supply chain. You know, they're responsible for operating, maintaining, and improving the equipment through decades of service. Many of these large programs of record, you know, they will be in operation for 30 or 40 years, and there's a maintenance schedule and cycle that goes along with it, and these people are responsible for sustaining that. So there's, you know, there's a lot of opportunities depending on the kind of product you have to, you know, really do some awesome work and get some really great sales if you're looking at the sustainment community, because that's a huge, I think, what Acquisition 101 teaches us, is 70% of the overall program costs. And again, they make very large procurements. They have to sustain a solution for, in some cases, 30 years at a time. And then there's the test and evaluation community. We've definitely had some companies in the past that had solutions that were more designed for instrumentation, that were very applicable for the test community, whether it was rewriting standards. So the people that are part of this community are really focused on organizing personnel and making sure that systems work as they're intended and that they're safe to operate. So there's a whole variety of tests that I think some of us need to be aware of that need to be passed, and the test and evaluation community is very much interested in getting some of the latest and greatest tools to be able to implement those tests effectively to make sure that we keep both the warfighter and others safe. Right, then the requirements community, which we talked about a little bit before. These are the warfighters, they're the end users and or the representatives. That's a community that's often overlooked. And when we move further into engagement, we'll talk a little bit more about that. There are avenues that one can pursue where requirements are actually written by the warfighters. And I've seen small businesses implement tactics where they have given some of the warfighters samples of their product, and the warfighter loved it so much, whether they used it stateside before they deployed, because you really do have to have safety confirmations and all that other stuff to give it to a soldier. But they were able to get a requirement written for their product because they got it to an end user, or they were sure to show somebody who was in that community who was able to see the value of that particular product and in the operational environment or interoperational setting. So those are very important customers that we need to make sure that we address and we share information with and to. And then obviously there's industry. And a lot of with DoD, we work hand in hand with industry professionals to get some of the latest and greatest technical solutions, but also the way that it's structured, we have a lot of the biggest systems being provided by large industry partners. And we also, on both sides, on the R&D arm and on the procurement side, have them performing sustainment and maintenance. So it's another very important customer that we need to be aware of. All right. Does anybody have anything else they want to add to that on the engagement team? No. AJ, did you have any comments you wanted to add?
Unmute himself.
Well, sorry. Okay, so another area that we need to also take a look at that I think is very important for us is understanding how the military categorizes things and items, and then who typically does the buying for those types of items. So you have different classes of materials that are procured by the military and others in DoD. We have class 1, which constitutes subsistence. We have class 2, which is clothing. We have petroleum oils and lubricants. We have, which is class 3, we have constructions and barriers. I've seen some, sorry, I just have to make a comment here. You think construction and you think barriers are like how lucrative could something like that be? I will tell you, I cannot tell you how many interesting barriers because of the last war effort we procured, and how there were overnight multi-millionaires just from selling barriers to the military. It was incredible. It was simply incredible. I'm sorry. There were different kinds of barriers. So, some were, depending on the topography and where they were, we had to buy and implement pop-up barriers. Depending on what the threat was, we oftentimes had to get like some sort of netted barrier that would like kind of tangle up the wheels of different cars depending on how fast they were going. So you'd be surprised. I mean, then there's a standard like Jersey barrier. It was very interesting to see how these barriers were implemented and how all of a sudden they became a really hot ticket item because of the changing threat. But there were, little things that you don't really think of. Even the individuals who were providing the support components for those barriers also did very, very well. So there's a lot of little things that you have to be aware of so you can think about how your solution can be applied for that particular environment. Class 5 constitutes ammunition. Class 6 is personal demand items. Class 7 is major end items. Class 8 is medical materials. Class 9 is repair parts. And Class 10 is materials for non-military programs. So again, we need to be aware of how the military buys and who typically buys what kinds of products so that you know who to approach and how to best approach them. Okay, AJ, go ahead. All right, we're going to have some commentary from our other engagement participant. Okay.
Hey, Janelle, I just wanted to add one quick kind of comment. Certainly we kind of spent a good portion of this kind of convo talking about acquisition within the government space. Similarly, we will get into a much deeper conversation with EGU kind of as we go through the process of engagement. But generally speaking, a lot of what Janelle's kind of highlighted throughout this process is going to apply quite a bit to the commercial side as well. So as she goes through these slides, there's quite a bit that's relevant to commercial space, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to provide you is an opportunity or a platform to take all the learnings from the curriculum development, the value proposition development, and get that in front of your buyers and customers. So I just wanted to kind of echo and piggyback off of what Janelle's kind of presented today, and that it truly does apply to the commercial space. But at the same time, of course, we know there's wrinkles with government acquisition. So sales cycles and things like that are a little bit different. But we can again get into that as we identify different customers and things of that nature. But hand it back over to you, Janelle. Here.
All right. Sorry, give me 1 second, please. Next slide. Okay. So another thing that's very important that we mentioned earlier is the importance of testing. And I think one thing that we need to ensure that our participants are very well aware of is that the testing in the R&D community is very different than the procurement and operator community. There are different standards. There's different, what the main objective of those tests is very, very different. So my recommendation to many of you is that we make sure that we consider our customers' test requirements early in the development process. And if you consider those requirements early in the development process, then you can build to those particular standards. I've seen a lot of vendors who've created solutions that did not consider the requirement on the other end, and they had to spend a considerable amount of money doing redesign and planning for hardening and a whole host of other requirements that the military has. My strong recommendation is to ensure that you work with your technical point of contact to identify those test requirements early. I'm sorry, I'm just seeing the chat. I apologize. Is it? Okay, is it? Sorry, thanks. I see that a number of people mentioned that we had a lot of feedback, so thank you for that. So again, understand the test requirement within your customer's community is a must. And with respect to the test requirements for the military, these requirements represent a set of very well thought out test specifications and procedures that are designed to achieve high quality and high reliability objectives. And testing to these standards makes sure that interoperability between products, because again, your solution is fitting into a much larger architecture that is being implemented oftentimes overseas, that there's consistency in electrical, mechanical, and thermal specifications. And so we need to ensure that we consider those things, because that is a big factor when deciding whether or not to make an investment in one particular technology or another. That's something that we need to keep in mind. Next slide. All right, so go back one. All right, so some of the best practices, and I'll be looking for some commentary from the engagement team on this one, is to remember that the process of engaging with the customer and or transitioning your technology from the R&D community to the buyer's community is a process, and it's not an event. All right, we need to remember that it is building strong relationships and communicating is very, very important in this space. I would say that it's extremely important in general, but very, very important in this particular industry, because I'd say it's very relationship driven. To make sure that you understand the requirement, not just the requirement that that was initially provided to you via the R&D community, but also understand the requirement that you're ultimately trying to build to. Having set agreements like good metrics, clear criteria, and explicit responsibilities are very, very important, so that once you meet those standards, you can move on to the next thing. If you don't really have a target identified, then oftentimes you find that changes, and you never know when you meet the standard to move on to the next thing. Identifying funding sources in advance and as much as possible is very, very important, particularly in the R&D community, and hopefully we'll be able to help you identify different sources of funding that you can go after on the engagement team. And those are some of the practices that we have. Okay, give us 1 second, team. We want to bring somebody in to also discuss this issue.
This is AJ. I think I'm actually off mute now.
All right, go ahead, AJ. We're waiting.
Okay. So you can hear me now? Hello? Hello?
Hey, AJ, are you on right now? Hi, AJ, are you there?
Hello?
Yeah, I think we can hear you, AJ.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks for the feedback. Okay, on the best practices side of things, the biggest thing I can tell folks is that people tend to go into pursuing business kind of in a haphazard or shotgun fashion, and so in order to be really successful, it's essential to go ahead and have a methodology in place. And there's a number of different ones that are out there, but the problem is that when you're doing things differently every time, it's kind of the opposite of the definition of insanity. But something doesn't work, then you're trying something else, and you're not really keeping track of what does work. So in a general sense, what you want to do is have a methodology of some sort that you follow, and so that's one part of the advice that I can give you. Another one that works is when you're going ahead and doing your homework. I see a lot of folks saying, well, okay, there's a program office, here's the guy in charge. Well, he happens to be a colonel, and he's very, very busy. And it's very rare that you're going to get a chance to talk to them. And besides, when they start moving up in rank, there's a saying in the military that colonels and generals don't do PowerPoint. So it's the worker bees down below them. They're really the ones making the decisions, and you need to go ahead and ferret them out. So part of that is that we can help you with advice and point you in some directions in terms of where to go. But you really need to find out who the actual influencers and decision makers behind the scenes are, because typically they're making a recommendation up the chain of command based on their expertise and the technical knowledge, and they're the ones that you have to get to. And then eventually, ultimately, the colonel or major or the general is the big decision maker. And assuming that the argument is well laid out for the technology that you have, they will rubber stamp what it is that is being recommended. But obviously, there's got to be some thinking and some validation in that. So the biggest thing I see is that people are kind of going and blasting away at the wrong target, and you have to set your sights a little bit lower, but you really need to understand the organization that you're talking to. Another piece of advice that I can give is that you need to really understand the requirements. And a lot of times, one of the fatal flaws that I see with a lot of businesses that have gone through the SBIR program is they don't realize that the road has moved. So you have a requirement that was written by the time you finish up a phase 2, the requirement may have actually been conceived 4 or 5 years prior to you even starting. And so you're doing a good job of heads down and going back and forth. And sometimes if you've got an active program or technical point of contact, they may be dialed in, but then there's other companies that don't. So what you need to do is really make sure and validate yourself the fact that they really are exactly, well, the requirements really do exist. So it's up to you to go ahead and do that because a lot of times, as the military changes people within an organization, they tend to lose a little bit of consistency and continuity. And again, we've heard this a lot from a number of companies involved in the Velociter program, that the points of contact they were dealing with left. I mean, they just either got promoted out of it or moved over to another position, and somebody else comes in, and what was the number one priority of the person they were dealing with before may have changed. Now, it doesn't necessarily get rid of the requirement that's out there, but it may have a different priority, at least in the eye of the person that you're dealing with. And and finally, I guess what I can say is that a lot of companies have a tendency they're very good at applying the science that they do to their own methodology, but business development is a combination of art and science in terms of knowing where to go, being consistent, being rigorous. If something works, then use that as a foundation, a building block, and continue to make that better and improve upon it and add a number of blocks and bricks together, and you kind of build it on out. And particularly when you're a smaller business and starting out, you really don't know. But you have to kind of figure out what works. Now, fortunately, you've got excellent coaches and mentors here. We on the engagement side have a pretty good idea of how to do things. And so I think that'll help. And the last thing I'll say, I apologize, I have one more piece to add, is that there's a bank robber back in the 1930s named Willie Sutton, and when they finally caught him, they asked him why he robbed banks. They said, because that's where all the money is. And I think a lot of the folks out there think that the government has money and that has opportunity, but even though we know that as a whole, you have to really go ahead and determine exactly where the money is and where it fits for your technology and products as you're developing them out, based upon the particular stage of maturity. So that's something else that, again, going through this time and time again, you keep adding to your knowledge base, and you start figuring out whether they have money or not. One of my former bosses told me one time, he said, I want two things out of you. I want to know, is it real, and what do we need to do to get it? And if there's no money, then you're going to go out, you're going to have a great meeting, you're probably going to ask you a lot of questions, things are going to be good. Then you're going to sit back, 6 months or a year later and wondering what happened, because there's nothing coming back to you. So those are some of the basic things that that I see would work, and I have those in my repertoire that I use as I go out and I validate business opportunities that are out there. That's all I've got.
insights. And I do see that we have a number of questions that are coming through the chat box, but we're going to start with some of the questions that we received prior to the event. Give me 1 second, please. All right, so we're gonna ask, so someone sent us a question where they said our technology is a software based and is useful for reducing costs by aiding data analysis and handling. Our anticipated revenue pathways are sales of commercial software licenses and software development funding to add features and capabilities. What is the best way to pitch this sort of product to the government, and what ways are they most likely to go about buying it? All right, does Abid or AJ have a response for that question? Okay, so there are a number of potential customers that we could identify with respect to the software solution. I guess, it depends on what you want to use it for, like what solution, if you're just talking about what you want to analyze, for example. And then you can use it to analyze a system, or you can use it for a variety of different things. There are the challenge sometimes with software is that there are different requirements in order to be able to even implement a particular software. The government has different, or the military in specific has different test requirements in order to adopt a new software. And I would argue that oftentimes for some of our military programs, it's often 5 to 7 years, if not more, behind before. So the approval process for a software for a PM to be, or a PM or PEO to be able to adopt a new software is fairly lengthy. There's some standards that I can share with you. I think some of them may have been updated last fall. And that it can be very difficult, but it depends on whether or not you're addressing an immediate capability gap that they have. At least that's what I've seen from my experience. And even if you are addressing an immediate capability, still getting the appropriate certifications and for them to be able to put it on whatever solution you're trying to integrate it with, it is a fairly lengthy process.
And just Janelle, I just wanted to kind of jump in as I read the question. It kind of just occurred to me, there's areas where, as we learn about your businesses, specifically the problems you guys may face getting into, the government or any customer at large, really, there's a lot of opportunities to partner. So for example, in this case where there's a software that's being developed that's not necessarily a product, a straight up product. It's actually just to help lower, like data analysis or processing data at a lower cost. There are strategic opportunities where you can kind of partner with say a software development company that's actually that has a product they're providing to the government, where you can become potentially a subcontractor to do a specific area of the overall process that you have expertise in at a lower cost. So those are the type of engagement activities that we'll go through and kind of help you identify potential partnership opportunities. If you have a better way or a faster way of doing something that may not be an end product, there's an abundant ways to get your technology or a better way of doing things into XYZ customers. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there as Janelle kind of mentioned her areas. I wanted to kind of throw that out there. Thanks.
Okay, and again, sorry guys, we're reading some of the questions that are coming in, and also the questions that we received yesterday and earlier this morning. All right. So we received this question yesterday, and AJ, definitely looking for your input on this, or looking for you to take a stab at this one first. So someone sent us sort of like the scenario that something that they're experiencing. So requirement or requirements exist in the POA&M for a target program of record that our technology significantly helps to achieve. The existing solution approaches for achieving this requirement are deficient, to the point where one or more yellow sheets deficiency reports have been issued by the program office's T&E team. We have been continually briefing the program office's advanced development, including the leads, members of the integrated test team, and other program office members. The subject of the briefings include both analysis of existing platform performance and performance with our technology in the loop to address these yellow sheets. We've also briefed key members of the two OEMs, Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, and there's a general acceptance by government officials that our approach is a valid one, and the performance is superior to the existing capability. Primes are more circumspect, but not openly hostile. We presented what we can at the conferences to generally strong reviews, and briefings are ongoing with the goal of climbing the program office's chain of command to the leads within the next few months. Given the above scenario, what are some of the best practices for moving from the general interest to acquisition? What are the common pitfalls? What common pitfalls do firms fall into at this stage? And are there any strategies for overcoming OEM resistance to work with the mature technologies in actual demonstrations? All right, we're ready for you, AJ. Go ahead.
Okay. So with regards to OEMs, some of them are good to work with, some of them are, less than ideal. And in fact, I was having a conversation with somebody earlier about the exact same thing in terms of the difference between Lockheed and Boeing and Raytheon and how you do things. One of the things that I've seen with OEMs, depending upon who you're going to, is that there's an occasional what I call NIH or not invented here mentality, that they have their own inertia, they have their own way of doing things, and when you walk in with a solution that's a ready-made solution, somewhat difficult, particularly being a small business, telling like a Boeing or a Lockheed what to do. And I guess in this particular case, it's it's dealing with some of the other primes. But regardless, I think you've got to have a bit of a duality when you're going in there, not just pitch to the primes, but pitch to the folks that have to go ahead and do the integration. So you may be a little late at this point in terms of going in and selling a capability from that standpoint. But nonetheless, if you have enough interest on the government side, then you can go and you can try pushing the prime, but you can also have pull coming in from the government as well. So it's a bit of a push and pull sort of thing. So you're not just doing one thing, but you're doing several. And the idea is to go ahead and get them to break out of their mindset. And if the government really, really likes you, the government can actually go in and direct you as a directed sub to the prime. And that's another thing that people sometimes don't think of, because if the government basically owns the program, the DoD owns the program, and then you've got the prime out there. Technically, the prime will do what the government says. Most of the time, anyway, sometimes it's not pretty, but most of the time they do acquiesce. So the biggest thing that I'm seeing here is what you have seems put in seems to make sense, and also within the program office chain, I think what you probably need to do is, again, go back and find out who the influencers are, who the decision makers are, and it may not be the guy, the colonel at the top or so. It could be some major in the office, or it could be some engineer that has his hands on it, but they may actually have a lot more influence than you think about, because they may be the internal subject matter experts. And if you can really find somebody that is an advocate, they can almost give you the steps. Go ahead and make something happen. So they can give you the details, the timeline, because you're not the first person coming in to them. They know exactly what the timeline is for getting things through the system. They even know who their own difficult people are, and can occasionally tell you how best to package or position what you have for making that happen. So, and in fact, just like you have, mentors and coaches here, you can actually find a coach in the government side that really wants to go and make these things happen, and literally give you all the ground rules that you need to do. Similarly, I've seen the same thing on the industry side as well, because some of the primes, they have people that really want to go ahead and improve something. I'll tell you right now, if you've got a technology that helps the F-35, you can probably find a friend at Lockheed or any of the first or second tier primes that are in there as well. So again, it's finding somebody that is an advocate, focus on that, and it's not just the straight science in terms of what you have, even though all the technicalities are good, but what are the benefits and how it will make the program better. And people tend to gravitate toward benefits versus features and specs and that sort of thing. So I think working it instead of a hard sell, but more of a soft sell and a finesse type of thing, and again, kind of arm in arm with the government, kind of getting arm in arm with the prime, that's how I've always seen the best success going forward. That's all I have on this one.
Thank you so much, AJ. So to piggyback off of that, I think, my recommendation, I would strongly recommend that you, identify somebody in that program shop who might, be sympathetic to your cause, your particular technology, to try to find out why they're so wed to the existing solution, given the fact that it's not performing well. I will tell you that as somebody who was in the rapid acquisition community, challenging in many ways the solution that we provided very quickly to warfighters in the field, they actually wanted our solution that, ultimately provided the same level of performance, but it was a lot smaller and modular. It could be integrated on a variety of vehicles. So, no matter where this particular unit was going, or whatever type of vehicle was available to them, they could integrate it onto it and it would still give them mobile comms. And, there was a big program that this was in direct competition to. And, when you really peeled back the onion, you found out that the real reason why is because there was a 3-star who hung his entire career on this particular solution. So much so that we were unable to go do testing one year for at BMC. We were unable to do testing there because they shut it down to make sure that this particular solution would actually pass testing because it failed miserably. So, really understanding why they're so led to that. It could be that it's really early in the procurement cycle. They know that they can't make any changes anytime soon because they're only 2 or 3 years into the program. Timing is also very important. If the existing solution is further down in its life cycle, then I'm sure you'd probably get more people listening to you and willing to integrate or willing to take a risk on a new solution, especially if they're in the process of writing the upcoming requirement for the new thing, because the existing solution is nearing the end of its life cycle. So all of those things are really important, like really understanding where the program is in its life cycle, really understanding why they're so wed to this particular program so that you can craft a message or potentially latch on to the subsequent requirement and or technology that they're looking at, would be my recommendation. Right, and we had a couple of questions that came in this morning, and Abid, I think we'll be looking for you to offer some insights on this. So this particular company is currently positioned for commercialization. They have a number of existing solutions, and they're considering spin-offs. And what I'm wondering is if you could share with us the conditions that would be ideal for someone who's looking to spin off a particular solution.
Sure. So, spinning off or any type of divestiture of your company is a pretty impactful strategic decision you're making. So you want to make sure that you're absolutely certain that this is the right business move. Generally, what you're going to see companies divesting portions of their business or product lines is usually to streamline up their operations. So if you have two products that are really integrated together, and you want to, the sum of the parts are actually more valuable separately, and the way you kind of look into that is model out kind of the cost and revenue and kind of see how each one separately might drive different profit amounts, and that kind of trickles to my next point, which is going to be generally you're going to divest or sell a portion of the company or split it off if a certain product or service area is significantly different or is generating different types of revenues than the other side of the business. And again, each scenario is going to be very different, so we can't kind of make some generalized statements here. But overall, it's a very kind of impactful decision to the business. So you want to, again, generally you're looking to streamline your operations. You're looking to sell off a maybe less productive area of your business, and then you kind of at a bigger picture, you might want to look at products or services that may not fall into your long-term strategic plan. So if you want to be in industry A or with client B, but 2 out of 3 product lines kind of fit into that, taking a deeper look at that kind of ancillary service or product to understand if you should be kind of investing your time or capital that side of the business is something that you want to definitely consider. But again, those type of decisions are either drive major value to your value creation to your business, but at the end of the day, it's a significant impact. So you want to make sure you've really kind of over all the rocks here. But again, that's something that as we go through the engagement process, we'll explore with you. We'll do the analysis and modeling and make sure that you kind of thought through different areas that you might not be thinking about.
Hi guys, thank you, Abid, for that answer. And you guys go ahead, or people that are on the line, please send some of your feedback via chat. I think we have a number of people, so it's really hard for us to mute and unmute external participants. But if you can go ahead and offer feedback, let us know whether or not we answered your question. And if you have a lengthy follow-up, then go ahead and email your mentor, and they'll get the question to us. But hopefully you're finding some of this information helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and read one of the questions that are coming through on the chat line, and it says, does the government license technology, or would they purchase from someone who has licensed and developed product with it? Oh, that's a good question. I would say that it depends. I've definitely seen situations, and again, I come from a unique community. I would say that probably the traditional acquisition community would do everything it could to actually try to own that technology. I'm only saying that from, especially if it's a larger procurement that's going to go on for 30 years, they try their best to negotiate that. But I've definitely seen instances where the government has licensed a particular technology and integrated into a solution, particularly with some of the smaller solutions that are more brigade set size and servicing particular subsets of groups within the military. And they purchased. I've definitely seen where they might have licensed or used the technology early on and then turned around and purchased it later in the acquisition process. So I've seen both in different instances for very different reasons. And again, it depends on what the driver and motivator is of the organization that you're working with, that procurement officer, and or the overall mission of the organization. I would again say that I come from a very unique environment, and that is the rapid acquisition environment where we were servicing soldiers that were in the war. They were fighting downrange, and so we did things that some of the more traditional PM shops might not have done. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next question, and this is a question that came from earlier today. And someone asked, what are the TRL requirements for DoD clients? And how do I identify appropriate small business S&T opportunities? And what programs exist for this specific type of technology? So I'm going to start, and then I'm going to have AJ go ahead and chime in. So I would say that the TRL requirements sometimes vary across agencies and programs. Different programs and or departments are answering to different people, and oftentimes they have different requirements. I would say on average, mostly acquisition folks that are on the right really don't want to see you until it's at a technology readiness level of 7. There's some room for some ambiguity, just particularly if there's a very strong need or there's a urgent capability or urgent need that they have. But in general, I would say that that's probably a good rule of thumb. And AJ, you can go ahead and chime in.
Okay. In terms of TRL requirements, as Janelle said, typically they want to see something that's more of a product they're ready to get, and they're closer to being able to be insertable. And so they want to see things that are more mature. However, depending upon what the product is, sometimes they'll do a bit of a bridge and start with you a little earlier stage. And it would depend on the organization, and they pretty much vary from organization to organization. So you have to do your homework there to make sure that you're not trying to sell a square peg when they're really looking for a round hole, and that's all their organization is capable of dealing with. In other words, it's got to be something that has the capability to purchase product versus do more continued testing or deal with advanced concepts or technologies like that. So pretty much just kind of going through the rest of the questions here that you have. In terms of being able to identify small business S&T opportunities, they're out there. BAAs, you go into Fed Biz Ops, they're out there. You have to find the right organization, obviously. So, for example, if you're doing something that's avionics related, then you wouldn't go try chasing after an organization or part of an organization that's dealing with software. So there has to be an apples to apples fit. And part of it is there are a finite, I would tend to say, a finite number of organizations that use different technologies. So, for example, if I was dealing with space, everybody obviously knows NASA, but the Army has a component, the Air Force has a component, even the Navy has a small aspect of that. And so you need to just ferret out which parts of the overall large DoD umbrella you would be a fit for on the S&T side. In terms of the COPTADS type technologies, as far as programs, those are relatively limited within the DoD. For example, one place that everybody keeps hearing in the news is the VA. That's good and bad. The VA is really looking for these types of technologies, but I had done some work for a company that was trying to get into the VA, and I happen to be a veteran, and so I have I have that shingle that I can put out or wear. So when I talk to them and I say, well, I'm a veteran, they go, oh, great, was the company a veteran-owned business? Well, no, it's not. So, well, they really like veteran-owned businesses. Okay, so that's something that you have to deal with when you're going into the VA, and there's ways to partner or team with somebody, potentially, that is. So that's one way of kind of doing an end run around that to get your capability in there, unless you've got something that really is a must-have, and then they'll pay better attention to you. So it's a little different than being a sub to an established prime. As far as primes, they're always looking for subs, but you have to find the right one, again, that is a fit. And, knowing more specifically about the opportunity you're looking at pursuing or the area of interest, and again, the type of prime that you're talking about, they may not be a fit. For example, again, if you're dealing with something with COPTADs, I probably wouldn't go to Boeing. But there's other companies out there that I would go to. In terms of bridge funding sources, not sure exactly what you mean about that. I mean, there are opportunities to get some small money from the government. If you're looking at something from outside, that's a whole totally different discussion. That's more purely on the commercial funding and financing side of things. But if you're looking within the DoD, they don't really have those, and I take that back. They may not have those for an organization that you're looking at pursuing to kind of bridge between a phase 2 and a phase 3. And I think that's all I've got on this one.
All right, thank you, AJ. So I see that there are a number of questions in the chat box, so we're going to go ahead and answer. 1 second. So I'm going to start with Stacy's email. From the SBIR perspective, phase 2 equals TRL level 6 in your view. Okay. I would say that it's appropriate for you to start having conversations early and often with the PEO and PM, making them aware of your technology, helping them think about how they could potentially insert that technology into their existing systems, or to make them aware so that they can start putting the resources aside or planning for your particular system. But I would say that while you're kind of doing that marketing and advertising and sharing that information about how you can solve their problem, you need to be aware on the other side that they might not get serious about actually doing something for you until you're at least at a technology readiness level of 7. And that does leave a gap between where many participants are leaving the program because a lot of them are ending the SBIR phase 2 program at TRL level 5. There's sometimes a gap between that and where the PEOs get really serious about really considering your technology. So again, my recommendation is that you start that conversation as early and as often as possible, that you develop really strong relationships with the people at the program executive offices and the PM shops. That's very, very important, that they know who you are, so that should a requirement change at any moment in time, they know that you have a solution that can meet their need. But also, please be cognizant of the fact that you might not see or hear some serious talks until your technology is more mature. Are the small business program offices of the respective branches, such as PEO SHIPS and Military Seacraft Command, a good portal to gain insights for who's who? Oh no, sorry, just skip. Who's who research for personnel details? I'm not sure that
I'm trying to source contacts. And see.
Oh, okay.
So they're trying to find a platform to research.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. That might be something that our team here might be able to help you with that. I honestly, I don't feel comfortable saying yes or no to that particular question because I don't really have a good handle on that. That might be a great place to start, but we might be able to also help you with that as well. Okay. All right, so I think there were some earlier questions. Can we scroll up? There was some, sorry, I'm trying to go to earlier. All right. So where do you find the hierarchy contact list for each group? Ooh, that's a hard one. All right, so I will go ahead and let AJ chime in on this one.
Sorry, which one again? Janelle, I'm not sure if
AJ, I think the question was, where do you find the hierarchy or the contacts for each, PEO or acquisition group or technical R&D group? And then the
Okay.
follow-up to that was, how do you connect what you find in the budget to those specific program offices? So if you track the money to the budget through, the budget documentation, president's budget or whatever, how do you connect that with those PEOs?
I'd say very carefully. That's a little bit of Monday humor, but actually, it's if you haven't done it before.
Where do you find the hierarchy / contact list for each group? So someone's trying to understand how we find that. I would say that there are a variety of ways that one could go about finding that type of information. Sometimes it can be hard because the Department of Defense is in some ways very secretive. And AJ, we're waiting for you to chime in.
Yeah, no problem. So everything, the government, fortunately, in competition, unless you're looking for, a heads up on something that's coming out with the exact details and specs, everything's out there. Everything's published in terms of what they have. And you can go through the government budget. You can do a broad search, and then you can narrow it down for things specific to your areas of interest. And within it, it does list the areas where the funding is held and the program offices. So the problem is it's work, but it's an intel research sort of thing that you have to do. But in these days of Google and the ability to go ahead and do word search terms, you can find them. They publish the budget on PDF. You can actually go through the individual budget elements that are applicable to you, and you can take a look at the programs. You can actually see whether they have money in there, whether they're ramping up or ramping down. And I'll give you an example of it. Years ago, I was consulting for General Dynamics, and I was doing work on the Army side, but the fellow who was heading up Navy programs asked for some assistance because this particular group was investing money of their own IRAD, positioning for future government programs. So knowing what their capabilities were, they asked if I could help them see what the lay of the land was. And they just didn't have anybody that really knew how to dig and delve into it. So what I ended up doing was going through and found out that the 4 programs they were working on, 2 of them were literally going to die in the next 2 years. So the funding was done. They had one program that was just scaling up, and another one that looked like it would continue. So that was good, and then went back through and then matched capabilities in terms of what they had with different program offices that also fit within that area. So if you're doing ships, I wouldn't be looking at the Air Force as an example, or checking Army helicopters. I'd be, focusing on the Navy, maybe the Coast Guard. Occasionally, even the Marine Corps, which is under the Navy budget, has some small water vehicles. And by the way, the Army does have very, very, very few boats. So with all of that, you go through and in the case of General Dynamics, went through, found out that I found 2 new programs that were going to be starting up, and you could see the trend of money as to when it would switch over from the R&D side over to the full-up program. And so based on that, they were able to go ahead and actually get in, kind of shift gears a little bit, and again, go where the money is. So coming back to this, as you go through the budget, the RDT&E plans that they have, you can actually find the program offices, a little bit of search via the internet. You can then go ahead and figure out where exactly, well, you can find the web page, you can start digging down, you can get phone numbers, you can get physical addresses, and more than likely when you start calling up and starting to work the system, you can get the some of the names of the actual program or project people. And as I said, if you know a specific subject associated with the program office, you know, Google those, and you can probably find some of the individuals involved. And again, you call up, you talk to some of the people in there. Some of them are willing to talk to you. Some of them are willing to pass the buck, and they'll kick you over to somebody else in the organization and make work for them, but in a good sense, because again, at the end of the day, they all want to go ahead and see their organization succeed and do well, and so I find most people are willing to talk to you if you have something of substance to offer to them other than, you know, wasting their time. So also do your homework before you go in to make the call. Have a good quick contact call speech, and again, have something specific to ask of them, and something specific you can tell them that would get their interest. I think that does it.
Great. Thank you so much, AJ, for that. And thank you for all the questions that are coming in on the chat, over chat. Really excited about this dialogue. A number of people were asking whether or not FedBiz and some of these other sites that allow companies to search for opportunities, if they were worth their while. I would say that a number of people have responded and given their opinion, saying that they didn't think that that was the most helpful. I would say that especially for a lot of our participants, you know, the things that might be helpful for us because of where we are in the technology development process and, you know, where you're looking to go would be to specifically look for solicitations that talk about requests for information. And that's kind of before the government, in some cases, have actually written the hardened requirement. So, you know, looking for those kinds of opportunities and responding to those opportunities early before they actually let the request for proposal is very advantageous for someone who's in the R&D stages or in the development, because then your particular technology might be integrated into the final RFP that goes out. So there are other free resources that a number of people have identified where you can find some of the information that's in these paid resources. And then there's some other things that, you know, we on the engagement team will recommend to help you kind of move from one end of the spectrum, the R&D spectrum, all the way over to the, you know, kind of like the procurement side of things. So we're almost out of time. And I just wanted to, again, thank you guys for all of your hard work thus far. We are really, really, really excited about working with you on the engagement team. We understand that you've been working extremely hard with the training and development portion of the Velociter program. Again, there will be additional information that will go out later this week about what to expect with engagement. As Claudia mentioned early in the presentation, we have done some initial analysis. We put together some initial recommendations that will be refined as we find out more about your technology and the overall capability. And again, we're really excited about working with you. Please send your mentors any questions that you were unable to submit during this time. And that would be helpful to us, because then we can go ahead and get started on, you know, thinking about how to best help you. And that's basically it. Did anybody have any other closing words? Was this helpful? You guys can respond in chat if you'd like. Thank you so much for the feedback. No, thank you. We can't wait to work with you. All right, thank you. Over and out.